All right, let's dive right into this explainer and absolutely master the psychological treatments used to rehabilitate offenders. Listen, if you've been sitting there wondering how to turn basic psychological theories into those top-tier EdXL GCSE psychology exam marks, well, you are in the exact right place. Let's get started.
Here is our roadmap for today to seamlessly connect all that psychological theory to your AO1, AO2, and AO3 assessment objectives. We're covering operant conditioning fundamentals, token economy programs, anger management interventions, restorative justice scenarios, and finally, nailing the exam questions. Section 1, Operant Conditioning Fundamentals, the Rules of Behavior. Because, honestly, before we can even think about evaluating specific treatments, we need to establish our foundational knowledge. You really can't critique a system if you don't understand the rules it's built on, right?
So let's start with the basics. Positive reinforcement is simply receiving a pleasant reward for demonstrating pro-social behavior. This virtually guarantees you'll want to do it again. Think of it as adding a bonus to encourage the good stuff.
Conversely, we have negative reinforcement. And honestly, this one trips up a lot of students. It is not a punishment. This means successfully avoiding something unpleasant, which also encourages you to repeat that avoidance behavior. You're basically reinforcing a behavior by taking away a negative experience.
And this brilliantly illustrates the difference between what we biologically need to survive, like food or warmth, which are primary reinforcers, versus what we've just learned to value. Think money, or in a prison context, tokens. These secondary reinforcers, they have absolutely no intrinsic value until we associate them with something we actually want. Okay, on the flip side of reinforcement is punishment. Positive punishment adds an unpleasant consequence to ensure an antisocial behavior stops. It's positive only in the mathematical sense. You are adding a penalty to the situation, like extra chores or a fine, to decrease a behavior. While negative punishment involves taking away a privilege you really enjoy, like losing your television time or your recreation break, the sheer removal of that pleasant thing is what completely deters you from breaking the rules again. Section 2, Token Economy Programs, Rewarding Pro-Social Behavior. Let's see how those operant conditioning rules actually come to life in a real-world rehabilitative setting. This program is entirely based on operant conditioning. Prisoners earn secondary reinforcers, the tokens, for being compliant and cooperative. They can then take those tokens and exchange them for highly valued privileges, like an iPod break, extra TV time, or treats. But for it to actually work, the reward must be genuinely valuable to the prisoner and handed over immediately after the good behavior. You can't just hand out tokens randomly, though. To successfully establish this, staff have to follow a strict game plan. First, they must clearly identify the target positive behaviors, like tidying up. Second, choose the physical tokens. Third, select genuinely desirable rewards to buy with those tokens. And fourth, they have to set realistic, achievable goals for the inmates so they don't just get frustrated and give up. But setting it up is really only half the battle. Maintenance requires clear communication so expectations are crystal clear. Staff have to give consistent feedback on progress, establish strict guidelines for exactly how and when to exchange tokens, and constantly review and adapt the program. If you don't check that the desired behaviors are actually increasing, what's the point? Now we must shift gears into our AO3 evaluation skills, because in your exam, you can't just describe the program, you have to thoroughly critique its effectiveness. Looking at the strengths, Hobbs and Holt's 1976 study proved it increases pro-social behaviors, like queuing for food and doing chores, compared to prisons without the program. Plus, it's super economical and easy for existing staff to run without hiring expensive psychologists. However, there is a massive weakness here, token dependency. The good behavior might literally vanish the second the prisoner is released and the tokens stop flowing. There is also a real risk that tokens could become contraband or that staff could totally abuse their power. Section 3, Anger Management Interventions, Cognitive Behavioral Treatment. This is a highly specialized intervention, specifically for offenders whose violent crimes are explicitly rooted in rage. Unlike the token economy, which, let's face it, just manages surface-level behavior, this is a deep cognitive behavioral treatment. Here, small groups work closely with a therapist to identify their own unique psychological triggers. The goal is to learn robust coping skills to resolve conflict without ever resorting to anger. The treatment follows a very strict 3-stage process. Stage 1 is cognitive preparation, deeply reflecting on the what and why of their past outbursts. Stage 2 is skills acquisition, learning rational, real-world coping techniques to avoid those triggers. And Stage 3 is application practice, where they intensely role-play these scenarios, actively testing out their new techniques, while the therapist positively reinforces their successful strategies. All right, let's put this under the AO3 critical thinking microscope to see if this intensive therapy actually holds up in the real world. A major strength comes from Ireland's year 2000 natural experiment. It showed that prisoners who completed the program rated themselves significantly lower on anger compared to a control group, and the prison officers actually agreed. It powerfully equips offenders with long-term coping skills, and it's a big but, it is incredibly expensive, time-consuming, requires highly skilled therapists, and is utterly useless for crimes unmotivated by anger, like fraud. Furthermore, the prisoner literally has to be genuinely motivated to change, or it's a waste of time. Moving right along to Section 4, Restorative Justice Scenarios, Facing the Consequences. This takes a totally different approach by forcing the offender to directly face the victim of their crime, to truly understand the fallout of their actions. Let's look at a specific exam scenario. Picture Adam, a 19-year-old caught drawing graffiti on a community center used by toddlers and the elderly. The absolutely crucial detail the examiner gives you here is that Adam's family has a history of antisocial behavior and actively normalizes his actions. They literally tell him, graffiti is not that bad. This brings us to a classic exam question. Explain one weakness of using restorative justice as a punishment for Adam for 2 marks. How would you secure maximum points when asked to evaluate this exact scenario? Let's break it down together. Section 5, Nailing the Exam Questions. Grab your purple pen to self-mark, folks, because we are going to break down exactly how the Edexcel examiner wants you to structure your answers to secure every single point. To get the full 2 marks for Adam's question, you really have to blend your skills. You need to explicitly link the AO2 application fact that his family normalizes graffiti and doesn't see it as a crime to the AO3 evaluation weakness that restorative justice fundamentally relies on the offender feeling remorse. Because of his family's influence, Adam likely won't feel a single ounce of remorse or recognize the seriousness of his actions. This makes the treatment an ineffective deterrent and, honestly, will probably lead to repeat offenses. Finally, let's tackle a 4-mark question evaluating James's 6-month prison sentence for assaulting someone who wouldn't give him a job interview. The crucial point here is balancing your answer. For your strength, state that as a 22-year-old repeat offender, prison protects the public by physically removing him from society. But for your weakness, you must point out that prison completely fails to address his obvious underlying anger management issues. Without proper cognitive behavioral therapy, you are almost guaranteeing future recidivism once he's released. Which leaves us with one absolutely crucial question to carry into your exam. Is our justice system currently designed to just punish bad behavior or to actually cure it?